Hi. Oh, I can't hear you. Hello? Hmm.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
We figured it out. Totally a problem on our end. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
No worries.
Someone took down the audio setup yesterday and just forgot to hit a switch. I'm Alex, by the way. I've been emailing.
Hi.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, I'm sorry for yesterday. I still have a bit of a a throat thing, but I'm more audible today than yesterday.
We appreciate you taking the time. I'm Art, by the way. I'm the executive director.
Yeah, we're located. I'm camera shy, so I'm probably gonna hop off. Art's gonna handle the interview. It is recording now, but we'll start it kind of at a point that makes sense. And then don't forget at the end to record a little intro that we can play right before the film.
Okay.
And don't forget to ask Will's question.
What's Will's question?
I sent you a link about the.
Oh.
Yeah. Because he couldn't be here today and he wanted to be.
Okay. So.
Is this where we start or?
Are we starting? Yeah, we're starting. It's really informal around here. I apologize if it seems kind of lax. We're kind of a low-key group, just doing cinema stuff here in Fort Wayne. Hey, Alex, she's frozen. Oh, there we go. Never mind. So I'm Art, executive director here at Cinema. Do you want to just tell us a little bit, Alex? I think we're freezing up.
Oh no.
Are we good?
Let me double check that it's not me. Let me just, sorry, one sec. Let me just.
Okay.
We're on the good Wi-Fi.
We're on the good Wi-Fi. Okay, I think we got it now. I think I got you. And you're Alex. Oh,
is this better? Is this better or worse?
Yeah, I think you're doing. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, sorry.
It's not a problem. Like I said, we're super low key. We can start this 12 different ways if you like. So, like I said, I'm Art. Nice to meet you, Amanda. By the way, say thank you to Liz for hooking us up with you, and we hope her magic show went super well.
Oh, yes. Thank you. I think it went really well, actually.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. When she told us she was doing that, we were just like, oh my God, that is so cool.
I know.
So tell us, Amanda, tell us a little bit about you and what you do. I know that you tend to do interviews with people who have a little bit of background, but most of our crew is not going to know what a costume designer does. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do?
As a costume designer, you get the script first and you read through it, get a sense of the story, and then you have a meeting with the director and usually follow with the rest of the creative team, like production designer, cinematographer, hair and makeup, and you kind of brainstorm ideas and come up with a look for the film. And then after you have that settled, I usually kind of come up with a design, and sometimes it also depends on our actors, and have conversations with them about their characters, and then come up with a plan from then on.
Now I noticed, and so you'll have to forgive me, I'm a researcher by trade. So one of the things I do before I do anything is do a little research. And so I noticed that you've done films, television, and even a video game. Can you talk about how those processes were different or similar?
Yeah. The video game, I think, is probably the more unusual part of costume, um, at least for me. It was a game called Telling Lies, from Annapurna Interactives, and basically that was kind of like, I want to say that came out um, 3-4 years ago, when there's kind of this um, gap, I guess, in the entertainment, where there's kind of a desire for this kind of interactive movie. So basically, for that project in particular, um, the way that the game is played is that the player is, obviously on their laptop or computer, and they're actually interacting with a fake, or like a designed desktop, which is really already the game. So the game is set up like a desktop, and so you're interacting with the computer. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like a curated computer desktop, where you're watching these different clips, and the game is structured in kind of almost like a puzzle. And so the way for us behind the scene when we shot that, what was, a new experience for me, was that we had multiple sets going on at the same time. So each character is in their space on their laptop, which is the camera basically, and they're interacting or having conversations via webcam, or leaving FaceTime like messages or something with another character in real time on a different set. And so that was really fun, a really fun challenge for me, which is different from film, which is usually just one camera. And yeah, I mean, in terms of the design process between the three, like I personally haven't done a ton of TV. Like the kind of episodic I've done have been more short form. But they don't really vary that much. I'd say that what's more different in terms of costume design for me in a different medium would be live performance, because I have a theater background. So that process is very different from film or TV or commercial, which is comparatively way more fast paced than live performance.
It strikes me that more often than not, the work you do, which is a wonderful work, and I've checked out a couple of things now, but the work you do oftentimes, when it's done well, gets ignored. The only time we ever seem to notice costumes if it's a set in 1800s England, or if it's a superhero film. That's the only time we really ever notice. But going back and watching Emily for costumes, one of the things I thought was really cool was how you kind of showed us different phases of where Emily was at, kind of financially and those kinds of things through her costumes. And so talk to me a little bit about, particularly with Emily, how the thought process went into costumes, and like what things are essential to Emily. Are things like, like color choice and those kinds of things, and what changed?
Yeah, color was a big thing that that came up pretty much first creatively from the director John Patton Ford. He's really his big influences are French New Wave cinema, and so it's like usually the palette is very curated and limited for a reason, right? Like to give a certain mood of the film. And as you can tell in Emily the Criminal, there's very few moments with warm colors. It's majority cool colors throughout the film in terms of the set, costume, and lighting. And where there was warm color, it is used purposefully to kind of contrast. For instance, Liz is Emily's best friend, and she's from a different socioeconomic background. And we wanted to show in the very short scenes that they have together the divide between them. And that was one way. Not that, you know, anybody from any kind of socioeconomic background couldn't wear rainbow colors, right? But it's just within our world, because it was so cool tone, that you really pay attention when she comes in, and there is a discomfort when she breaks through the kind of established color scheme that we have. And in terms of like Emily, obviously we needed to show that she's struggling. I mean, she has a uniform, an actual uniform, because of her catering job. But on top of that, she also has her kind of day-to-day uniform, which is really, you know, a few of the same t-shirts, tanks, jeans, the same denim jacket throughout, because someone who's working multiple jobs, you don't have the kind of luxury of time to like think about, oh, how should I look today? Like that is not, you know, that's not of importance. And it was important for me to like show that in very subtle ways. And then when she does wear something else, it's again, usually for a key moment in her life, say when she's like interviewing for a job that could totally take her life in a different direction. That's when she puts in the effort. Yeah, and it was important too, like with her catering uniform, just because of the ending, which I will not give away.
If it makes you feel better, we're showing this after the movie, so you're fine.
Oh, okay. So I can talk about it.
Yeah.
So one of the things that intuitively, knowing that the very last action sequence where, you know, the fight happens and everything, that she is in her uniform, it was important to me that when she makes the decision to just, you know, leave, there is a shedding of that identity. Okay. And her taking off her uniform at the bus stop and like kind of wiping the blood off her with it, like that to me was an important moment. Just to see that, like, oh, this is a transition moment. And then of course, like, you see her in warm colors at the end.
That's I'm so glad you talked about that, because it's such a great moment of collaboration, right? You know, one of the things that oftentimes, like, I teach the production classes over at the university, and oftentimes my students are under kind of the misconception that the director does everything, right? The director is responsible for all the things and all the choices and all those things. And hearing you talk about how important it was for you as the costume person to have this visual moment on screen that is represented by the costume. It's such a great moment to learn about collaboration on a film set. And can you talk a little bit about like how those contributions come about? What kinds of meetings in which those decisions are made?
Yeah, Aubrey, John, and I we were having, you know, casual meetings, basically, like just via text or on set or by email, like every single day, just to like, you know, really hone in on like, because her costumes are not what typically, like you said at the beginning, like when people think about costumes, they think about period costumes or superhero costumes. They don't really think about like everyday, like just t-shirt and jeans as costume. And because of that, and because also, in fact, I would say out of all the characters, her costumes for the majority of the film, almost the most muted, and almost kind of like without identity in a way. And the reason I say that, I think, is because when you look at her, you don't really know, like, oh, what is she about? And like, and the reason behind it is that like John really wanted her character to be just anybody, right? And like she's kind of the everyman within this world. And it's important to kind of almost not cast too much kind of prescribed identity and personality to her right from the get-go. Like we wanted her, like Aubrey's amazing acting, to come through like slowly, and like and I think I like I'm proud of the fact that like the costumes kind of lend space for that. And I think that, I mean, to me, costume design shouldn't just be flamboyant and colorful and glittery all the time, right? If it doesn't serve the character. And we were constantly just talking about, like, for instance, another big piece of costume that was constantly in our rotation for conversation was the kind of oversized blazer sport coat that she had when she's it was the first time she goes to visit Liz at her workplace, where they're prepping her for the interview. So like she's kind of, it's not the interview, so she doesn't need to like dress up per se, but she having met the rest of Liz's coworkers, she knows that she needs to kind of bring in a little bit. And there is a sense of like her kind of thought process of like, well, what do people wear at these, because that's not really her her domain really. Like she hasn't really worked at an office like that. Like from what you can see at the very first scene, like she's interviewed for these jobs, but clearly haven't had much luck. And it's like, anybody thinks of like office, you think of like, oh, shoulder pads and like a jacket. But there is something kind of almost like unfitting, it doesn't fit her very well. It's kind of a man's blazer. Like the idea behind that, obviously that's like more for my work really than for like the character, because we never mention it, is that John had this like whole long essay basically about Emily's background and like her difficult childhood with her parents who split up when she was very young, but she had this kind of idealized version of her father who left them. And so the idea is that maybe this is one of the items that her dad left over for her.
Okay.
That it's like, okay, this is an important time for me. Like what's gonna, like we all have like specific items of clothing that are kind of a shield, like, oh, I wear this jacket every time I need to look a certain way, smart or put together, or whatever it is.
Or maybe not even look a certain way, just feel that way, right?
Yeah, just to feel exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to feel that way. And that jacket was that for her. And like it, other people look at her, and it's like Liz even mentions and that was kind of an ad lib thing on set, like wasn't written in the script, but she was like, oh, like oversized blazer, like and it's like other people may look at her and be like, oh, that doesn't look very good, or like doesn't fit her very well. But to me, I kind of, that was something that we discussed for a long, because that was one of the scenes we shot kind of towards the end of the shoot, that we've had this time to like really think about like, okay, does that make sense? is that gonna look weird, but is that gonna look weird in a good way? Like, because it feeds the character, and we ended up going with it. The moment when she sits, when I think Liz and the coworker leave, and she's sitting at the like conference table and kind of looking around, just kind of taking it in, like, could this be my life? Like, there's a sense of pride there. But I'm sure the audience looking at her also kind of like, something's not right, something's a little off.
I totally agree, and I think you got across exactly what you were hoping to. I think that's so cool, and to hear that backstory is amazing. And I want to kind of a little bit, and if you're struggling, please feel free, if you need to take a break, let us know. One of the things I keyed into an interview was you were talking about you and Liz coming into this film and how the story and the politics of it were important. And I noticed you did another film recently, Pleasure, where the politics behind the film were front and center, talking about that. And it was funny when we talked to Liz. Liz joked with us that she'd never really, as a production designer, been asked about her politics, but they were so important to what she does. That how much of the message of the story is important to you when you come to a project?
Very, and I think as I get older and I'm getting more, projects, it's more important to me to be selective and to choose ones that align more with with my politics and with my sense of what I want the world to be to be like. I've definitely read plenty of scripts that I just had to put down after about 2 pages, where sadly it's like still very misogynistic and xenophobic, and but I am getting more I'm getting more scripts that do align with my politics more these days, which is really amazing to see, and especially more projects written and directed by women, and women, like people of color. That's super exciting to me. But yeah, especially with this, and with Pleasure, but obviously Pleasure is like you said, it is so forefront. And it, like, I think the film really rides on that like line where it's kind of like, where is it gonna tip? Right? Like, I mean, I don't know if you've seen it, but there are definitely like very uncomfortable scenes. And with that, if I may go into Pleasure a little bit,
Sure.
I probably wouldn't have signed on to that if it were a film not written by and directed by women, and who also Nina Tiberg, the director, was very adamant when we first met that she wanted an female department head team, which also was important to me and was really exciting to me. I've never worked on anything.
Well, I feel like that's the only way you could have told. I haven't seen the film, but I've seen the trailer, and I feel like the only way you could have told that story in the way that you wanted to do it, as a critique, as opposed to continuing to perpetuate the male gaze, is to have an all women-headed crew. I mean, it's the only way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And not that it wasn't still challenging, because the subject matter and some of the scenes are challenging and were triggering to many of us, and just as women living in this world. And so that was important to me, and I think whenever we did come across times where we're like, do we feel safe here? Like, we would pause, and we did pause production several times to like have meetings like on set to be like, do we need this? You know, what is this serving? And I'm really glad that we had a team that promoted that and encouraged that. That was important to me. And as for Emily the Criminal, when John talked to me about like the reason behind the script that he really needed to get out, because he actually, I don't know if you've read in some of the press, that he did that catering job like himself.
Yeah.
Like back when, like soon after he got out of, I think, film school. And he was, you know, very honest and telling and sharing with the team that there were times when he didn't know if he could make it. And I think those are really the types of stories that we need to see more.
Yeah.
You know, it's just it's like so much of like our experience as a collective, right? Yeah.
No, I remember, I lived in Los Angeles for about 7 years. I did my undergraduate work at Loyola Marymount.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember back in the day the jokes of every server at the restaurant has his script in the back pocket, right? You know, like everybody there is just waiting for this. And you know, I've had friends in the entertainment industry who have been through these struggles, you know, and the identity crises of, am I going to make it, or am I going to have to take a different job, and those kinds
Mm-hmm.
of things. And certainly, you know, the conversation around student loan debt and being, you know, the value of being a student these days is resonant to me as a educator,
Mm-hmm.
somebody who teaches at these universities. And you know, how do we best not only prepare students for a job, but for the world, right? And I think that those are two different missions. That, you know, you could prepare someone for a job and not prepare them for the world. And that's hard. And you know, and I think that having these conversations in our movies is important in those ways, because it opens you know, I joke about Cinema Center here that if somebody leaves Cinema Center not talking about the movie, then we've shown the wrong movie. Right? It's like the whole point is the movie's supposed to open a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's so cool in moments like the oversized, you know, blazer, that what you're thinking about is, how does that moment lead to a conversation about this character, about how they function, about how they serve the world.
Yeah, I definitely have my own opinions about like feeling prepared in education for the world myself. Yeah, I think that I love the schools that I went to. I love that I, you know, spend time at an art school. For grad school, I went to Cal Arts. I wouldn't trade it for anything. That's also where I met Liz, our production designer. But I definitely think that there is kind of a disconnect sometimes between higher education and like the workforce. It definitely took many years for me to like figure out, oh, okay, this is really what this is where I should go to get to where I want to be there, you know? And sometimes it's hard. It's almost, especially in film, which is unusual. You know, it's an industry that you really don't necessarily need to go to school to be successful in the industry. And I truly value my education, and I'm all for education. But it's interesting how when I meet people who haven't had the education that I had, that I, you know, for whatever reason, that it's almost like they have a better idea of like, oh, these are the steps than those of us coming from, um, you know, this other background. Yeah, I would love there to be more, and I'd love to somehow help be part of that, to close that gap a little bit.
It's so interesting you talk about that, kind of roundabout journey. Did you always want to work in costumes, or were there other parts of production you were interested in?
I actually, like, since I was 12, I wanted to be a filmmaker. Um, and um, my parents are like big film buffs and just grew up watching like world cinema. And when I went to undergrad, I actually went for film. But the program that I was in, once I was in it, I realized it was more kind of like an auteur filmmaking style, and like more geared also towards like documentary. And I have already kind of, I've worked in theater all through high school, and so like I really wanted the team spirit, the community, and so I switched to theater. And after kind of trying out, like I, interned in camera department and art department, and then finally my costume professor, kind of in my senior year, was like, hey, you might have a neck for this, like why don't you try it more seriously? And so I was kind of like a late bloomer in costume.
Well,
Yeah.
do you ever find yourself wanting to go back? I know when we talked to Liz, she's like, I've got a script and I'm hoping at some point that it's going to work out.
Yeah, she's amazing. She produces, she writes, like, yeah. I mean, she's direct. I mean, I think she and I both have some, kind of college level short films under our belt somewhere that, she may be more proud to show hers than mine. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think I did take some directing classes, and that was kind of where I realized I was way more focused on every detail within the frame than the actors. And that was kind of where I realized, like, oh, I kind of, I'm more obsessed with these other things. Maybe I should switch focus. I don't know. Maybe one day. I'm not shutting my door to that, but yeah, for
I
the
think your
time
attention
being.
to detail is amazing. It's so cool to hear the thought process behind why you're doing this or why you're doing that, and to hear just even the conversation about the character description and the thoughts about her parents and how that all worked. I love that. There's such richness in that, and it really does reinforce this notion of the details required to be a storyteller, right? These stories don't just get patched together by putting together shots. It's part of this long process that is incredibly thoughtful. And it's so cool to hear about your process, because you are incredibly thoughtful. And that's, it's exciting for us to hear that here, just even in Fort Wayne and watching these movies, to think about the kinds of things that go into what we see and how all that happens. Like, I feel like one of the things I should be asking you is what I'm not asking you.
What's that?
What are the kinds of things that I don't know about that go into this process that, as an insider now and as somebody who's worked in this industry, what are the things I don't know?
What are the things you don't know? I don't know.
Okay, it's one of those things where, as somebody who is inside the process, what do you wish the audience knew about how a movie gets made that, we don't see because it doesn't come out on screen?
I see. Honestly, I mean, I can't speak for my experiences have mostly been in contemporary kind of character driven stories, and less in period or superhero type films, which I have a lot of respect for. It's but I'm kind of more in the character driven path. And I have to say that usually the things that people don't notice is like, at least in terms of like costume, are like the work that takes into like wrinkling something in a specific way to like show war, like time passing, or how long this character's been in it, stains that maybe you barely see it, but it's there. Like, or like dyeing things to like match something else on set or something like that. Like things like that, that's like you almost, it's like a passing like 1 second, moment, but it's like those are little things that really are important to us. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's like anything. Oh, actually, this is funny, but with Yusuf in Emily the Criminal, he, in the end, I don't think anyone would notice that he actually had like more than one tracksuit. But they are just different in like black, navy, blue, like different shades enough that we're like, okay, that's his uniform, but it depends on the mood. He's like a little darker or a little lighter or a little brighter. But in the end, it probably didn't show up, and it's totally fine. But like that's how detailed we were, like, and some days we're like, wait, what color was he in the previous story day? And it's like it's a whole, thing that we need to figure out. But those things may not show, but that's like where the hard work is a lot of the times.
I think, it's one of those things where, as a communication scholar, one of the things that we often talk about is the things we notice as opposed to the things we know. And I think, like we don't necessarily take the time to notice the black versus the navy kind of thing. But I think internally, when we're recognizing the character, it does say something. We just don't fully acknowledge it. It does, I think it does reflect on us. And I think we do use it to understand the character in that moment. And so I think that the importance of those level of details, and I go back to it, right? It's the the old joke about people like costume designers, that when you're doing your job well, we don't notice it.
Right.
Is that the fact is that we as people who are watching the thing on screen realize that the mood is different because of these kinds of clues. We're just not going, oh, it's a blue tracksuit today, so he must be more happy.
Right.
And so I think that I think we do, consume these things and read them with these clues embedded in them, and it does change how we experience the scene. And so I think the work you're doing really is fabulous for the amount of thought you're putting into it and the ways in which that thought translates into being a storyteller. I think that is so cool and so wonderful, and it's so nice to get like somebody's lens to that, because the fact is that we don't normally hear from somebody like you when we talk about a film.
Yeah, and if I may add something, sometimes it's also how the actor feels in something.
Okay.
So even if, say, it ends up being just a two-shot waist up, you don't see what they're wearing on the bottom. It's important to the actor that it's still part of, what the character would wear. Things like that, or like, oh, this is, I mean, you see Emily the Criminal ends up being mostly very tight. So a lot of times you don't even really see full body, but it's what helps the actors get into character that matters more than, that helps them, bring the emotionality to the scene, to that. I think costumes, that's what they do for actors.
I think that's great. And I think it's wonderful that you would end kind of on that collaborative note, because I do think that, seeing this process as more of a collaboration is one of the things I like to emphasize for students, for people around town when we're talking about this. When the credits roll, there's never just one name there. The fact is that this is a collaborative art fundament. And so thank you so much for helping us reinforce that message, because I think it's really important. As we now transition out of the kind of formal Q&A, one of the things, if you could do for us, could you give us kind of an introduction that goes before the film that we could use so that we could promote you doing the Q&A after?
Yeah, of course. What should I say?
I just, if you want to say, hi, welcome to Cinema Center. Stay tuned after Emily the Criminal for a Q&A with me and Art.
Okay.
What?
Wait, you said welcome to Cinema Center, right?
Yeah, and then and just introduce yourself, tell them who you are and what you do, and the Q&A afterwards. Yes, we're Cinema Center. And so you can welcome people to the theater and tell them a little bit about what we'll be doing in the Q&A.
Okay. Hi, I'm Wing Yee Lee. I'm the costume designer on Emily the Criminal. Welcome to Cinema Center. Please stay tuned after the movie for an interview between myself and Art.
Yay! That's great. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
thank you so much for
you.
taking time. I know you don't feel well. I really appreciate you coming out with us and doing this.
No problem.
I can't thank you enough. So
thank you so much.
Yeah.
Do you think that, is it weird to ask for the recording?
No, you absolutely. We'll send it to you. Absolutely.
Okay.
Of course.
Yeah, we can absolutely send it to you. This was great. And I think you, like I said, your answers were so thoughtful, and it was so much great insight into what you do. For instance, we have a theater student who works for us who's really interested in costume and costuming and those kinds of things. She's gonna love this. And so, even if she's the only one that loves it, she's gonna get so much out of this. And so you're doing this is gonna inspire a bunch of people here in Fort Wayne. And thank you so much for doing it. I can't thank you enough. Yeah,
if there's any student follow-up questions, like, feel free to email me and I'll try to help out.
I absolutely will do that. Like I said, I can't thank you enough. This was wonderful, and so many people are going to get so much out of this. So thank you for doing it.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.
You too.